Well, welcome to the 700 Club. This issue will destroy New York. Well, that's the warning from Mayor Eric Adams over the growing number of migrants in his city. And it's not just New York. Other major cities are also having problems dealing with thousands of new migrants.
Well, that's creating a political headache for President Biden. And all of this is happening as the crisis at the southern border has intensified in recent months. CBN White House correspondent Abigail Robertson has the story.
Historically, July and August see a dip in border crossings due to the high heat. But that's not the case this year, as summer border apprehensions rose more than 30% for 2 consecutive months.
Just during this summer alone, we've already had dozens of migrants die out in the desert who have succumbed to heat exhaustion.
Tucson Border Patrol agent Justin De La Torre says they're encountering people crossing from all over the world.
Some of the countries that we see most frequently are from folks from Ecuador, Senegal, Mauritania, Egypt.
According to the Washington Post, Border Patrol officers made 177,000 border arrests in August, up from more than 132,000 in July and 99,000 in June. More than half of those 177,000 August arrests involve families, an all-time high, which exceeded the record for families crossing set in May 2019.
The increase in the number of families arriving is really a reflection of Title 42, which banned asylum for family units for really the last 2.5, 3 years. That being rescinded, now we have this backlog of people who want to migrate.
David Beer from the Cato Institute tells CBN News many of the family units come from the northern triangle of Central America.
The administration has created a regulation that says if you cross illegally, you're not going to receive asylum. That message is not being heard.
In places like New York City, which has received an estimated 100,000 migrants in the last 15 months, Democratic leaders are calling for President Biden to do something.
The Biden-Harris administration and Congress must come up with a real solution. The United States Department of Homeland Security must be part of that solution. We must ensure our newest Americans can work lawfully and build stable lives.
New York Mayor Eric Adams recently hosted a rally with asylum seekers where he called on the federal government to step up by expediting work authorization and reopening a closed jail to house migrants.
No support.
And at a town hall Wednesday, the mayor warned just how serious this crisis is for his city.
And let me tell you something, New Yorkers. Never in my life have I had a problem that I did not see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this. I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City.
Adams also saying it's mandatory that the federal government respond to this fight. In response to recent criticism, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre claims that President Biden has done more to secure the border and deal with immigration than any other president. Reporting from Washington, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Well, I beg to differ with that statement. I think he's done more to enhance illegal crossings at our southern border than any other president. And he did it because he campaigned on the issue. He wanted to say that President Trump was xenophobic and this was all racist and we're not going to have those kinds of policies. I'm not going to build a wall. I'm not going to do these other things. And in effect, all of that campaigning said, if I win and you want to come to the United States, there's going to be this big neon sign on the southern border that says, welcome. So now we're dealing with it. I want to remind everyone this shouldn't be a partisan issue. Mayor Adams of New York is a Democrat, and he's coming at his own Democrat president saying, you've got to do something. If this isn't fixed, you can say goodbye to New York City. That's a huge warning. I hope the administration wakes up to it. What I want in America is politicians who stop politicking after they win and actually start governing and say, what's the best for the nation? What's the best for our cities? What's the best for all of our social services? If you overwhelm them with this kind of immigration where people don't have documents, can't legally work, aren't ever going to pay Social Security or income taxes, you're creating an untenable burden. You cannot support this over time. Please wake up to the problem. And if we can make it nonpartisan, can Republicans and Democrats actually get together to write immigration laws that make sense in light of the current crisis? I hope we can do it. We need to pray that it happens because New York City is at risk. In other news, the high school football coach who won his right to pray on the field, he tells CBN News the long legal battle was worth it. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That is right, Gordon. I spoke with former Bremerton, Washington High School assistant football coach Joe Kennedy on CBN's Faith Nation program after his resignation. He said he felt like he'd become an outsider after returning to the school, and although he had intended to stay the whole season, he and his wife prayed over the weekend after returning to the field Friday night. He believed this was the perfect time to leave on his own terms, along with the fact that they're caring for an out-of-state family member. He also says he's seen God at work throughout his 8-year legal ordeal.
God's hand has been everywhere on this. From the beginning, how ridiculous is it that a guy could get fired, a high school football coach could get fired for taking a knee for 30 seconds after a football game? This has been going on in football from the beginning of football. People have been thanking God after a game. This wasn't something new, but for it to make this much news, headlines, and all the way to the Supreme Court, and God knew what he was doing for such a time as this. He made it where we got God back into the public schools, back into the public square, and that did it legally. And now we have more religious freedom now than we haven't had probably in the past 50 years, since I've been alive at least. And that is just amazing. And you can't tell me that God isn't part of that to bring him right back into a public school.
Coach Kennedy also told CBN News that he'll keep fighting for the religious freedom of all Americans and asks people to keep praying for him and his family. Well, turning now to the weather, the first Category 5 hurricane of this year's Atlantic season is here. Hurricane Lee whirling through open waters toward the Northeast Caribbean with winds up to 160 miles an hour. Thankfully, it's not expected to make landfall. The National Hurricane Center says dangerous surf and rip currents were forecast for most of the East Coast starting Sunday. Well, this latest storm coming on the heels of Hurricane Idalia, which hit Florida and the Southeast last week, causing catastrophic damage in some areas. Idalia also washed away years of precious memories for people like a retired shrimp fisherman. CBN's Operation Blessing was there to show him that hope can be found even in the most desperate situations. Brody Carter brings us that story.
I knew that I needed to go, and literally within 10 hours, I was on the road.
We're gutting their homes, moving their furniture out, washing their wet clothes and linens, anything we can do to try to help them get through this tragedy.
It's been a little over a week since Hurricane Idalia tore through the Gulf Coast and then seemingly vanishing from the news headlines as fast as the storm dissipated.
It didn't get a drop in it.
Yet outlasting the fading news cycle, dedicated volunteers with CBN's Operation Blessing U.S. Natural Disaster Team remain on the ground in some of the hardest hit areas.
They needed someone to care, someone to step forward, someone to let them know that God was still listening, that God was still watching, and God was there to rescue.
Crystal Moore from Norman, Oklahoma, is one of the more 50 volunteers helping Operation Blessing be the hands and feet of Jesus. The disaster relief team have passed out food, water, and cleaning supplies to several cities in Florida and Georgia. They've also tackled household work orders along the coast, helping families like Tom and Dee Stokel.
You got to have instant love for a team like this. They're welcome here anytime, disaster or not.
As a retired shrimp fisherman who's lived here since 1979, hurricanes are nothing new.
I've never had a helper as good as you. Well, thank you. When I ran a shrimp boat.
Idalia's fury severely damaged their home and waterlogged years of memories, forcing Tom and his wife to pick and choose what stays.
Can I pitch it, sweetheart?
Good. You're strong enough. Go ahead and pitch it.
And what goes.
We'll survive, and we're getting rid of a lot of stuff we didn't really need. If we and my wife had to do this alone, we'd probably be looking for a place to be cremated.
Volunteers like Crystal experienced firsthand how invaluable it is when someone shows up to help during another person's darkest hour.
Today changed him. Today changed me.
And although it can be hard to move on, sometimes a storm can show us what we need to leave behind from the past.
We want to praise you for everything, the abilities that you've given all of us.
To focus on what God has in store for us in the future. And Idalia's survivors are grateful that Operation Blessing has helped them move into those days ahead.
Operation Blessing is one of the best caring group of humanity. Something I haven't encountered before.
Brody Carter, CBN News.
It took a lot of effort to do that.
Well, that's a ringing endorsement. God is with us through the storms, but after the storms, he's with us in tangible ways like Operation Blessings and its volunteers. Gordon?
If you want to volunteer to help those people, there's the major news cycle has certainly moved on, but there's still a huge need. So if you want to volunteer, all you have to do is call us. 1-800-730, this is a special number, 1-800-730-2537. You can also just go to Christian Center Church, 7961 West Green Acres Street. I'm not about to pronounce that city, but you can find it on a map. We're not going to provide any overnight housing. You have to be 18 years old, at least 18 years old. And we want, if you want to help people in very tangible ways, do it right now and get in touch with Operation Blessing.